everyone. Welcome to another episode of pickHERupper. I am so happy to be back. I'm your host, Jazzy J. And today's topic, about finding your identity. Something really huge to me, and like I've said before, and I'll keep saying it, is self-love and self-care. Love of self is a really big thing, and it's, whether I like it or not, it's just going to intentionally be woven into everything that I do, because I feel like a lot of us don't love ourselves, and we're missing out on a lot of life by not loving ourselves and taking care of ourselves, because we're told that we're, supposed to love other people, that we don't take care of ourselves. Another thing too is like a lot of us don't really live to our fullest capacity. We're too busy with the mundane routine of work, eat, sleep, bills, repeat. And when you're doing that, you don't have time to think about yourself. You don't have time to find your identity because you're worried about keeping the lights on and feeding your kids, So knowing who you are can be really helpful in life and can help you really live your life to the fullest and find your purpose. And we all have one, but we just all don't do the work necessary to really find it. So with that being said, let's transition into story time. So this story time, it's more so like an article versus like a story. And it's from Meg Selig on psychologytoday.com. And it is titled, Know Yourself? 6 Ways to Know Who You Are. So she starts off with the benefits of self-knowledge. And some might say like, aren't the benefits of knowing yourself like obvious? But since a lot of us don't know ourselves, don't think it's so obvious. So of course, happiness is a great benefit of self-knowledge. Also, less inner conflict. A lot of times you go back and forth with yourself. I notice people who don't really have an awareness of their identity, it's really hard for them to make decisions. It's so hard. And I love the fact that I have gotten to know myself, and it's just so easier for me to do things. But another thing about knowing yourself is knowing your strengths and weaknesses, and knowing that everybody else doesn't have those, and being aware of that and realizing, this is a gift. This is a skill that I have. This isn't just something that everybody is, able to do and just doesn't do. I was naive about that growing up. And better, like I said, better decision making. That was the next benefit of self-knowledge. Self-control. When you know yourself, it's a lot easier to understand what motivates you to do things, and it's easier for you to resist bad habits and to develop, new ones. Resistance to social pressure. When you're grounded in your own values and preferences, you're less likely to say yes when you want to say no. And I know for me, I have put a lot of my life, I've always put other people's needs and preferences above my own, because I've always felt committed to being there for other people. And in doing that, I haven't allowed a lot of time for myself. And I would feel guilty taking time for myself. And it's just kind of like, how can you feel guilty about taking care of yourself? You're not going to be here if you don't take care of yourself. But I think that that's a common thing that a lot of us actually really go through. Tolerance and understanding of others. As I said, knowing yourself, your awareness to your own kind of struggles and things, that you're able to empathize with other people. You're able to recognize that this is something that I do. This isn't something that everybody is just able to do. This is a skill that I have, or this is something that I don't do, and this is something that they do and that I admire and I wish that I could do, And then, ultimately, having self-knowledge really helps you just have a better life. So just being who you are truly helps you feel more alive and makes your experience of life richer and more exciting. So this article, it carves out something, building blocks of self, which she calls your VITALS. So the capital letters in vital signs form an acronym of the 6 building blocks of self, or VITALS for short. The letters stand for values, interests, temperament, around the clock, she pushed it with that one, life missions and goals, and strengths and skills. So on the article, she goes into all of these different vitals into detail, and I'm not gonna like go into the detail of that. I did want to kind of like touch on the around the clock one though, because that one was a little, it was like, oh. So the around the clock category refers to when you like to do things or your biorhythms. Are you a morning person or a night person, for example? At what time of day does your energy peak? If you schedule activities for when you're at your best, when you're respecting your innate biology, it is you perform better because that's when you're the best. So, I mean, even though people might shame people for doing things at night or not, oh, you sleep until 1 o'clock. Yeah, because I'm most creative at 2 a.m. So I'm in the studio doing what I need to do. Like, there's no shame in that, but that's just, when you have that self-knowledge and then when you're able to give that to others. The author continues to say, as I look back on life, I realize I've been a morning person since birth. Those fun sleepovers with girlfriends, I loved being included, but I didn't like staying up late. One joy of my adult life has been finding a partner with biorhythms like mine. We wake up early, we go to bed early, we both get snappy unless we eat 3 square meals a day. We hate brunch. While the idea of biorhythm preferences may sound trivial compared to lofty qualities of value of self, like values, your daily life is more pleasant when you are in sync with your biology in every area. It's easier to enjoy life when you don't waste energy pretending to be someone you aren't. Whew! That is a word, because a lot of times we conform who we are to like meet other people's standards or like who other people want us to be, whether it's like our friends, whether it's our partner, whether it's our parents, but we'll dive deeper into that later. So she wraps it up saying, being true to you. Even if you know your vital signs, it's hard to remain true to yourself because you're constantly changing and because society's rules often conflict with your own. So for all of us, being yourself sounds easier than it actually is. She even includes a quote from Gretchen Rubin where it says, my first commandment is to be Gretchen, yet it's very hard to know myself. I get so distracted by the way I wish I were or the way I assume I am that I lose sight of what's actually true. And I think that's a pretty fair statement for all of us. A lot of times we have an image of who we think we are, but we don't actually know who we are. We know who we want to be. We know who we want to aspire to be. But who are you actually in this moment? Who are you really? Not who you want to be, not who you aspire to grow into, but who are you? And learning to know yourself, learning your strengths, learning your opportunities, that will only help you grow. And like I said, kind of find your purpose. Because a lot of us don't know the skills that we have. We think, I think, well, I can't speak for everyone, but I know for myself, skills that I had, I didn't see them as skills. I saw them as stuff that everybody else was capable of, but just was lazy and didn't do. And the first time that I realized that my strengths are like leadership, organization, and planning was when I was helping someone out at the church, and I was helping her like get a program together, and she was like, you are truly blessed, Jasmine. This is so special, da da da. And I was like, really? Like, I honestly thought like that was just a normal thing that everybody could do, but just didn't want to do. And making that realization of what are my actual like skills, it helped me kind of find the path and the lane that I want to go into. And right now I work in music management. And for me, talent management period is like a dream because I am the person that can make it happen, and the creative is the person that has the ideas and the passion and the drive behind things. And I love that. I love helping people make money. I love helping people do what they really want to do. And so, you know, for me, talent management is really great. And even with pickHERupper, I'm trying to make you guys the best versions of yourselves, and not because there's anything in it for me, but just because I want people to, you know, be able to fulfill their life's purpose. Because a lot of us, we just scrape the surface of what this life really could be. And if we dug deep and really got into it, we could have such an amazing life. But yeah, that pretty much wraps up story time. So let's transition into our Keep It Real session. So for finding your identity, the first step to finding it, you know, an easy question might be like, well, who am I? And that's really not a simple question, you know, because who you are, it's complex and you can't just like put it into words. If someone asks who you are, like, who are you? I'm Jazzy J. Like, I'm Jasmine Kier. Like that, you can say your name, but you can't just say everything that embodies who you are in a person in a sentence. So first things first, realize that that's not a simple question and that is something to actually ponder on. And while you're trying to think of like, okay, who am I? A really easy way to get there is to think about, all right, who am I not? And for me, I always feel bad when I can't tell someone what I want, and when I just tell them like, okay, I don't know exactly what I want, but I know what I don't want. I don't want this, I don't want that, I don't want this. But it's like, actually, that helps you narrow down and figure out your decision when you are able to look at, okay, what do I not want? So when you're trying to figure out who you are, thinking about who you aren't, it comes a little bit easier to you. And another thing that I had briefly touched on was about like, stop worrying what others think of you. Us worrying so much about what society thinks of us, what people at work think of us, what our friends think of us, what our partner thinks of us, what our parents think of us, that molds us into something. And sometimes it's something that we don't necessarily want to be, but it's something we don't want to let people down. You know, how many people have gone to school for 8 years, become doctors, and been like, bruh, this low key is not what I want to do. I was just trying to make y'all happy. That, you know, this is, I'm a first generation here. And so I wanted to live up to your standards, versus like, this is a skill of mine that I actually wanted to pursue, or a passion of mine. You know, I wanted to save lives. That's why I became a doctor. They say that. It's not all true. But yeah, we can all be a little insecure about what people think about us. And I know for myself, for the turning point of where I stopped really worrying about what people thought about me was when I moved to Los Angeles when I was 17 by myself. Me moving down here, and I know that sounds young, but I graduated high school when I was 17. I was just that kid that, you know, was always the youngest in my class. I always had older friends and all of that. It's getting weird because I'm getting older and I'm not the baby anymore, and it sucks. But, you know, whatever. I'm forever young. But yeah, when I moved out here by myself, no friends, no family. I mean, I have family who lives out here, but they were always distant family because A, they lived in Los Angeles, and B, they were my grandma's brothers and sisters. So like my second aunts, or like great aunts and uncles. And I mean, my grandma's one of 11, so the age bracket is pretty wide, but still, you know, like we would see them every once in a while, but they weren't like, you know, my cousins that I hung out with or grew up with like that, you know? So moving out here, I could decide who I wanted to be, who I didn't want to be. I didn't have the social pressures of friends, you know, and me and my parents, we're cool, but we're not super close where they're calling me every single day or even every week. Like, you know, so I had time to really figure out who I wanted to be. And that's when I like gained my strength to be the person that I am today. And the path to finding yourself, it's not linear. There's ups, downs, you get distracted and all of that. And also knowing who you are isn't a constant. We change because, you know, what I wanted 5 years ago versus what I want now are different things. So the work to knowing who you are, it's not like, oh, I found myself once, I can never lose myself again. It's like, no, finding your identity, knowing who you are, knowing things about you, it's actual work, it's an actual process, and there are things that go into it. And I mean, it's really worth it if you do the work. But also, something that played into it when I say stop worrying about what others think of you, as I said, I would go out of my way to bend over backwards for people, you know, and to make sure that I'm always there and doing all these things. And it wasn't always reciprocal, you know, people wouldn't always necessarily treat me like that. And you know, there's even friends that I have to this day where it's like, we're super close. We've known each other for forever. We moved out to LA at the same time and all of that kind of stuff. And I might see them once a year, once every 6 months, but it's because, you know, they're the kind of people who might always want you to come to them. And I stopped doing that. If there's no reciprocity, if you can't never make it to my side of town, then this friendship will be what you make it, you know? And I can't be the person holding it down and making sure things happen all the time. Also, when you're worried about others and trying to be, you know, trying to be solid, trying to be there all of the time, you can end up like wearing yourself really thin and giving your energy to people who don't necessarily, not that they don't deserve it, but that's just not where your energy should be going. You know, I found myself in some friendships that became draining. Every time that friend hit me up and wanted to hang out, I would be like, and my friend would be like, Jazz, why do you hang out with this person if that's your reaction every time they hit you up? And it's like, oh, well, you know, we went to college together and we've been friends for such a long time and da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And it's like, bruh, no. If they're not feeding into your purpose, if they're not helping you grow, if you guys aren't on the same wave, then you've got to trim the tree. It's just like when you have plants and you're trying to help that plant grow, you know, just like Jesus said, you got to be, you know, the vine trimmer in there. You got to cut off the dead stuff that's not contributing to or like adding anything to your life. To make room for the good stuff, to make room for the stuff that will actually help you grow and to stuff that you know, your energy should be going towards. And another thing that I want to like really keep it real with is don't let society tell you who to be. There's no way to be black or to not be black. The whole concept of being an Oreo, the whole concept of, you know, you're not black enough, all of these things. I mean, I'm saying this because I am black, but I'm also Mexican, but I identify with my blackness because that's how everybody else in this world sees me. Nobody looks at me and is like, oh, you Mexican. You know what they say? What are you mixed with? So it's like I'm also not black enough. So it's like that's something that I've dealt with my entire life is not being black enough, definitely not being Mexican enough. And you know, for me, my mom didn't teach me Spanish, but her and my grandma would speak it around me all the time, and I'm nosy. So I learned Spanish on my own to figure out what they were saying. And you know, now I don't feel so lost when I'm at events. And I went home one time and my grandpa was like, oh, you've been in LA with the Pisces too long. Like how you speak Spanish now? Cause he would speak to my grandma and now I know what he's saying. Versus growing up, they would always have their little conversations in front of us and I wouldn't know what they were saying. So I felt cool about that. But getting back to it, don't let society tell you who you are.
can have interests. You can like anime, you can like heavy metal, you can like whatever you want. And that doesn't take away from your Blackness. That doesn't take away from your cultural identity at all. So, you know, a lot of times we don't allow ourselves to really dive into things that we're passionate about just because of our fears of how we're going to be perceived by other people. And we just limit the amount of life that we can do. Oh, I'm not doing that. That's white people stuff. Oh, I'm not doing that. That's, you know what I'm saying? Like, we limit the amount of life that we can really be out here living by being put into a society standards box. And it's like, I want to fight that so much just because I just know it too often. And I'm biracial, as is my partner, my boyfriend. He's also biracial. And something that he speaks really properly, but you know, he's from Chicago. People in Chicago, they don't always have the super proper dialect. So he was always told that he spoke white. And it's like, wait, I speak properly, and so now I'm being told that I speak white, you know. And he was in like the gifted learning program, like all throughout 8th grade. Stopped it when he went into high school. I'm like, oh, so when you needed the gifted learning program the most to get into colleges is when you switched up and you decided to not be in it. Like, there's just little things where it's like we don't do what's best for us because of how people perceive us. And it's just like, bruh, that's all about finding your identity. That's all about self-love. That's about putting yourself first. It's not about what other people think or what the other, you know, standards that people hold you to. It's about finding who you are and what you like about you. And so with that, I want to transition into our pocket pickHERuppers that I want you to be able to take home with you to help you, you know, when it comes to finding your identity. So one pickHERupper is journal about you. So a lot of times when we keep journals and diaries, we do it to like talk about like our day and different things. So not just about that, but do it about things that you like or your preferences, and also include things that you don't like. That's going to help you figure out who you are, is just being able to really sit down and think about that. Because a lot of times, I promise you, I was a journalism major in college, and I would interview people all of the time. And when you ask people questions about themselves, like no one just knows, because no one just takes the time to sit and think about who they are. And isn't that crazy? We're so busy on the go, living life, being you, that you never just sit and think about, wait, who am I? You know, and the things that you do or don't like. And so another pickHERupper is to write goals, a goals/wish list, and not just like 20 or 30. Try to aim for like 50 or 100, because the higher the number, the more it makes you want to push yourself to figure these things out about you. And when you do this regularly, because as I said, we grow. So like I said, you know, the things that I wanted 5 years versus what I want now for myself are totally different. And they should be. We should never stop growing, because knowledge is infinite and there's always something more to learn. We can never know it all because new things happen every day. So, you know, constantly grow, constantly, you know, write your goals and keep those lists so that you can look back at them at later dates and be like, wow, you know, I've done all this, or wow, I have really changed because I don't want any of these things anymore. And then lastly, I want you guys to remember your vitals. So your values, your interests, your temperament, around the clock activities, life missions, and meaningful goals, and your strengths. When you think about these things, when you do the work and you're able to really ask that about yourself, you're able to figure out who you are. When I was 23, I was blessed to be in a discipleship program at my church. And again, I was one of the youngest people there, as I always am. And I loved it because I was able to figure out things about myself. I was able to figure out my core values: honesty, is one of my biggest core values. That's when I'm talking about like keeping it real, like all of that kind of stuff. Honesty has always been a thing. I hate liars. I hate when people aren't honest with themselves. And I've always been just like a really big truth speaker. It has gotten me in trouble a lot because of my delivery of that truth, but I've refined it. And look at me speaking truth in this little podcast and speaking life unto people, okay? You know what I'm saying? There's a way to do it. And I had to learn that because I was naive and thought, well, I'm being honest. How can someone be hurt by honesty? And it's like, girl, honesty hurts more than anything in the world. People can shake off lies. It's the truth that hurts, that cuts like a knife. But once I realized that some of my core values are honesty, justice, and just different things like that, it really made me just kind of see how that is like really, weaved through my life. And my core values, they don't really change because they kind of make up who I am. My characteristics and different things like that change, but your character, who you actually are, if you really think about it, you've probably processed things the same way your entire life. Like you've become more educated, but your viewpoint and your lens on things has pretty much been the same. And that's because you have a certain set of core values. So yes, so values, interests, temperament, around the clock activities, life mission and meaningful goals and strengths are your vitals. And I encourage you to explore them all. So that's it for today, and thank you for joining me for another episode of Pick Her Upper.